There is a detail in the life of John Wesley that few people truly take seriously, something that seems simple at first, but carries a depth that can completely transform the way you live your faith. And here it is. He woke up every day at 4 in the morning, not out of religious obligation, not out of empty discipline, but from a deep conviction that the first hours of the day determine the spiritual strength of everything that follows. Now pause for a moment and think about this honestly. While most people are still asleep, distracted, or starting their day on autopilot, he was already awake, already in silence, already before God, building something no one could see, but that sustained everything he did publicly. And maybe you're asking yourself, what exactly did he do at that hour? What was the secret hidden in those early mornings? And why did it make such a difference in his life? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to understand is not just about waking up early, it's about learning to live with intention, depth, and real spiritual direction. And before we continue, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments, I want to truly seek God. Because sometimes everything begins with a simple but sincere decision. Now pay close attention, because this is where something begins that can completely change your routine. John Wesley didn't see the early morning as just a time. He saw it as a spiritual environment, a moment when the world is quiet, when distractions haven't started yet, when the mind is clearer, when the heart is more open. While the day had not yet brought its pressures, worries, and demands, he was already positioning himself spiritually, aligning his mind, strengthening his heart, preparing his faith. And that makes all the difference, because most people start the day reacting, but he started the day positioning himself. And there is a huge difference between those two things. When you start your day reacting, you are led by circumstances. But when you start your day positioning yourself, you lead your actions. Now let me show you something even deeper. The secret was not just waking up at 4 in the morning. The secret was what he did with that time, because waking up early without purpose transforms no one. What transforms is the intention, the consistency, and the depth of what you do in that moment. And Wesley had a very clear practice. He began with silence. Yes, silence. Before speaking, before asking, before reading, he simply placed himself before God. And that says a lot, because in a world full of noise, rush, and distraction, he began with presence. And presence changes everything. After that initial moment, he moved into prayer, but not mechanical prayer, not automatic repetition, but a real conscious, deep conversation. He wasn't trying to impress. He was focused on connecting. He spoke to God like someone who truly depends on him, like someone who truly understands that without this foundation, the rest of the day loses direction. Now think about this honestly. How have you been starting your days? With rush? With distraction? With your phone? Or with God? Because how you begin often determines how you finish. And this is exactly where this secret confronts our reality. Another extremely important point is that John Wesley didn't do this only when he felt motivated. He did it every day. And that completely changes the level of this conversation, because it's not about emotion, it's about discipline. It's not about feeling, it's about decision. And here is a truth that can change your life. What you do every day defines who you become. Not isolated moments, not peaks of intensity, but daily repetition, consistency, faithfulness in the simple. And Wesley understood this deeply. Now let me show you something few people realize. Those early mornings were not easy. It wasn't comfortable to wake up early every day. It wasn't natural for the body. It wasn't always enjoyable. But he didn't negotiate with it, because he knew that what is difficult at the beginning becomes strength over time. And maybe this is exactly what you need today, because you might be waiting to feel motivated before starting something new in your spiritual life. But the truth is, motivation comes after the decision, not before. Now, I want to ask you a very direct question. If you had to choose between comfort and growth, which would you choose? Because waking up at 4 in the morning represents exactly that. Comfort or growth? And Wesley chose growth every single day, and that built something that impacted generations. Now write in the comments, I choose growth, because that decision could be the beginning of a real change in your life. Now I need you to go even deeper with me here, because if in the first part you understood the value of waking up early and the spiritual meaning behind it, now you will realize that the true secret of John Wesley was not just the time he woke up, but how he structured that time, the intention he placed in every minute, the awareness that those early hours were not just a habit, but a spiritual foundation that sustained the rest of his day, and perhaps even his entire life. And before we continue, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments, I will seek God in the morning, because transformation begins with a practical decision, not just inspiration. Now pay very close attention, because this can completely change your spiritual routine. John Wesley did not start his early mornings in a rush. He didn't skip steps. He didn't try to produce spirituality. He began with something that almost no one values today: awareness of God's presence. This means he didn't jump into prayer automatically. He first positioned himself inwardly. He slowed down his mind. He brought his attention to that moment. He recognized, I am before God, and this is extremely powerful. Because most people do pray, but they pray distracted, unfocused, without presence, and that's why they don't experience depth. And here is the first principle you can apply. Before speaking to God, be with God. It sounds simple, but it changes everything. Because when you are present, every word carries weight. Every silence has meaning. Every moment becomes real. Wesley understood that the quality of your presence determines the quality of your prayer. After this moment of awareness, he moved into something very practical and incredibly powerful: examining his heart. And here is a point that completely separates superficial spirituality from deep spirituality. He didn't begin by asking for things. He began by looking inward, honestly asking himself, how is my heart? What is occupying my thoughts? Is there anything I need to adjust before God? And this requires courage, because looking within is not always comfortable, but it is absolutely necessary. Because without examination, there is no growth. Without awareness, there is no transformation. And Wesley did this every day. Every single day. Now think about this honestly. How often do you truly pause to examine your spiritual life? Not just live automatically, but reflect, adjust, realign, because that is what builds depth. After this examination, he entered into prayer. But here is another extremely important detail. His prayer was not based on the quantity of words, but on the quality of connection. He didn't speak just to speak. He didn't repeat just to repeat. He communicated with intention, focus, and truth. And that completely changes the way you pray, because you stop trying to impress and start connecting. Here's something very practical you can apply. When you pray, speak less, but with more awareness. Avoid distractions. Avoid rushing. Avoid superficiality. Speak like someone who is truly standing before God. Now there is something even deeper that John Wesley did during these early hours. He fed his mind with the Word of God at the very start of the day. This is strategic, because the first thing that enters your mind influences everything else. If you start your day with worry, your day will feel heavy. If you start with distraction, your focus will be weak. But if you start with the Word, your mind aligns. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be long. It needs to be consistent. A passage, a reflection, an application, and that alone can change the direction of your day. Now let me show you something even more powerful. Wesley didn't just read, he meditated. He thought about what he read. He applied it. He allowed it to sink into his heart. Because reading without reflection informs, but reflection transforms. And here is a point that can change everything for you. Don't rush in God's presence. Hurry is the enemy of depth. Wesley was never in a rush during these moments, because he understood that this time was not just another item on his schedule. It was the foundation of his life. Now pay attention to this, because it may challenge you directly. Many people say they don't have time for God, but they have time for everything else. And that reveals priority. Wesley had many responsibilities. He traveled, preached organized people, dealt with challenges, and yet he protected this time as something non-negotiable. And maybe that's the decision you need to make. Not to wait for time, but to create time. Not to fit God into your routine, but to build your routine around Him. Now let me tell you something that can shift your mindset. You don't have to start at 4 in the morning, but you do need to start with priority. The point is not the exact hour. The point is putting God first. Before distractions, before demands, before the world enters your mind. And that is possible, with small adjustments, with decision, with consistency. Now there is something even deeper you need to understand. Those early mornings didn't just strengthen Wesley spiritually, they shaped his identity. Because what you do repeatedly builds who you become. And by spending time with God every day, he didn't just gain strength. He became someone stronger, and the same will happen to you. Little by little, day after day, not immediately noticeable, but deeply real. Now I want to ask you a very direct question. If you started your days with God, intentionally, consistently, deeply, what would your life look like in a few months? Stronger, more balanced, more aware, more stable? So why not start? And before we move to the final part, write in the comments, I will start my day with God, because that decision could be the beginning of a transformation you can't even imagine yet. Now I want you to truly slow down and pay attention to every word in this final part, because we are not just concluding a teaching here. We are arriving at the point where everything becomes real, where everything turns into a practical decision, where everything stops being inspiration and becomes positioning. Because in the end, it's not about admiring John Wesley's discipline. It's about deciding whether you will apply any of it in your own life, especially when no one is watching, especially when there is no applause, especially when it's just you, the silence of the early morning, and God. So before we continue, do something simple but powerful. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments, I choose to start with God. That declaration may seem small, but it carries a decision that can completely change the direction of your spiritual life. Now pay very close attention to this, because it may be the key to everything you've heard so far. What John Wesley did at 4 in the morning was not just a spiritual practice, it was an invisible construction of inner strength. While the world was sleeping, he was strengthening something no one could see, but that sustained everything people would later see. And this is extremely deep, because we live in a generation that values what is visible, immediate and fast results, but completely ignores the silent process that builds those results. And here is the truth that few accept. What sustains a strong life is not what you do occasionally. It's what you do consistently, in secret. And that is exactly what those early mornings represented. Now think about this with total honesty. How many times have you wished to have stronger faith, a calmer mind, a stronger heart, more emotional balance, more spiritual direction, but tried to fix all of that only with isolated moments, with passing emotions, with quick decisions that didn't last over time? That's why many people start, but don't continue. They get excited, but don't remain. They feel, but don't build. And John Wesley teaches us the exact opposite. It's not about momentary intensity. It's about daily consistency. Now let me show you something even deeper. Those early mornings shaped not only what he did, but who he was. Because when you spend time with God every day, something begins to change inside you, even if you don't notice it immediately. The way you think changes. The way you react changes. The way you see problems changes. Your spiritual sensitivity increases. Your patience grows. Your clarity strengthens. And this doesn't happen all at once. It happens little by little, silently, but in a real way. Now there is something you need to understand very clearly. You don't have to copy the schedule, but you need to copy the principle. The point is not simply waking up at 4 in the morning. The point is giving God first place intentionally, before the world takes your attention, before worries fill your mind, before distractions dominate your focus. And this requires decision. It requires sacrifice. It requires discipline. Because yes, it will be difficult at the beginning. Your body will resist. Your mind will try to negotiate. You will think about giving up. But that is exactly where transformation begins. Now, let me tell you something very directly. If you keep starting your days the same way, you will keep getting the same results. This may be uncomfortable to hear, but it is necessary. Real change requires a change in behavior, not just desire, not just intention, action. And maybe what you need to do is not something complex. Maybe it's simply to start in a simple and consistent way. Wake up a little earlier, set aside a few minutes, turn off distractions, be still, pray sincerely, read something from the Word, reflect, and repeat it the next day, and the next, and the next, because it is this repetition that builds something solid. Now pay attention to this, because it can completely change your mindset. The impact of starting your day with God is not only in that moment, it is in everything that comes after. Because when you start well, you respond better. You decide better. You control yourself better. You maintain more balance. You handle pressure, problems, and challenges better. And this creates a chain reaction. One thing influences another. And little by little, your life begins to change. Now I want to ask you a very serious question. If you know this can transform your life, what is stopping you from starting? Lack of time? Lack of discipline? Lack of consistency? Or simply lack of decision? Because deep down we all know what we need to do. What's missing is doing it. And this is where everything is defined. Now let me show you something even deeper, perhaps the most important point of all. God is not waiting for perfection in your early mornings. He is waiting for presence. You don't need to do everything perfectly. You don't need to have a flawless routine. You don't need to feel something extraordinary every day. You just need to show up. Be there, remain, even when tired, even when sleepy, even when you don't feel like it, because presence creates relationship, and relationship creates transformation. Now I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine what your life would look like in 6 months if you started every day with God in a simple but consistent way. Imagine your mind calmer, your faith stronger, your decisions more conscious, your heart more aligned, your life more balanced. This is not theory. This is consequence, the consequence of daily decisions. Now the final question is, are you willing to pay the price of consistency to experience the result of transformation? Because there is no shortcut. There is a path. And that path begins with small decisions repeated every day. And now before we finish, I want to invite you into a moment of decision. If possible, pause for a few seconds and pray this with me, not with perfection, but with sincerity. Lord, I recognize that many times I have lived on autopilot, starting my days without direction, without awareness of your presence. But today I choose to change. Today I choose to put you first, even if it is difficult at the beginning. Even if I need to adjust my routine, teach me to be consistent, teach me to be disciplined, teach me to seek you even when I don't feel like it. I don't want just moments with you. I want a life with you. Transform my habits, strengthen my faith, and help me build something that lasts in Jesus' name. Amen. And if this prayer represents what you want to live, write in the comments, "I will start tomorrow," because this decision can mark the beginning of a new season in your life. Don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who also needs to hear this message, because many people want to change their lives, but don't know where to start. And now you do. Start early, start with God, and keep going, because the secret was never just waking up at 4 in the morning. The secret has always been putting God first, every single day without compromise,